Hello, and welcome to this special presentation from Story Into Screenplay. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gerald Hanks. I'm the founder of Story Into Screenplay. The Story Into Screenplay offers script analysis and one-on-one consultations with clients in every stage of the screenwriting process. And my guest today is Paul Zeidman. Paul is an award-winning screenwriter, blogger, script editor, and podcaster. And today we're going to talk to Paul about his book, Go Ahead and Ask, Interviews About Screenwriting and Pie, Volume 1. His follow-up, Volume 2, is out now. And first of all, Paul, thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks, Gerald. Just a quick backstory. You and I have known each other for several years,
Right.
And we've talked on the phone before, but I think this is the first time we've actually had face-to-face communication.
Yeah, I know. I think we talked. I think we chatted on Facebook. We chatted on the phone a couple times, and just to know we're not complete and total strangers here.
Exactly.
But
We're old pals.
Yeah, but like I said, thanks for joining me face to face today for the first and hopefully not the last time.
My pleasure.
Okay. And first of all, for people who may not be familiar with your work, can you tell us how you got started in your career?
Overall as a writer, I've just been, one of those people who was a writer pretty much my entire life, and got into high school and kind of discovered one-act plays. So kind of dabbled with those a little bit. And then when I got up to college, I realized, hey, you know what? I like movies and I like to write. I can actually write movies. So after I got out of college, my wife helped me track down screenwriting software, because this was, the mid late 90s, and they really wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So we actually had to go to a couple of software stores when those were a thing and say, do you have any screenwriting software? And just, you could see the question mark form over these people's heads. Like, what are you talking about? But we eventually did track one down. I'm in San Francisco. And at the time, the writer store had an outlet over in Sausalito. And so we picked up a program called Script Thing. And that was the gateway. So I used that. And I think they've been since bought out by Movie Magic, but it's still the basic program. And I've since switched over to Final Draft. But I've just been, I love movies. I love to write. And once I started writing screenplays, no turning back. I just love doing it.
Like I said, in the book, did you mention how you were also a script editor and script analyst? How did you get started in that avenue?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think there was really anything specific. I think I started I kind of had to teach myself how to write screenplays. I didn't go to film school or anything like that. It's at the time, there were only a handful of books compared to how many there are now. So I just read a lot of screenwriting books and read a lot of screenplays to kind of get an idea of what it was like. Of course, as with anybody, there's a lot of trial and error. You make a lot of mistakes when you're starting out. As I say, you don't know what you don't know. And boy, I did not know a lot when I was starting, but I eventually, like I like to say, with each draft, I got a little bit better. So I think just being able to kind of keep working at it constantly really helped me fine tune my skills and my craft, and got me to the point where I am today. Still working on, as I like to say, having or trying to establish a career as a working screenwriter. In a way, a lot of people have said, well, you already are. But I said, well, until you go to the movies and you see my name up on screen, that's to me kind of like the final objective. But that being said, like a lot of screenwriters, I do a lot of script writing oriented things. I work on my own stuff. I do a lot of reading and notes for other people. And I read for a couple of contests. And it's just, I think the more you can absorb, the more you can educate yourself about screenwriting. I think that would really help any writer. And it's definitely benefited me. And also, when I kind of first got into screenwriting, at the time, screenwriting blogs were just starting to come into be. And I was going through a lot of those. There were so many that were around. A lot of them have since fallen by the wayside, but a few of them I think are still going strong. Like Go Into the Story, that's a powerhouse right now. And there are a few others. And it inspired me like, well, I could probably write my own blog. So in 2009, I decided I was going to give it a try. And so I set it all up, and I started it with the intention, I'm going to do this every day, just like all these other people. And that lasted all of 2 weeks, because it's exhausting trying to post something every day. So I decided, twice a week. That's a good amount. So I did that for several years, and then have since trimmed it back to about once a week. And that really works out fine for me because I don't put all that extra pressure on myself. I have to work on my scripts and come up with a blog post every day or at least once a week. And I've been able to really, I guess, vary it up. When I started, it was about kind of like chronicling my journey as a screenwriter, about developing the craft, but also about developing a career. But since then, I've really branched out a lot. I've written about my experiences. Like one post was about me going to Skywalker Ranch. Another was going to a pitch fest type of thing in Burbank, and also experiences I've had dealing with other writers, both in person and virtually, or online, or however you want to put it. And it's just been a great experience, and a lot of people seem to really enjoy it. So I'm very happy with how that's turned out. But one of the other things that developed from the blog was about 2014, I came up with the idea that when you're online, you always get ads or pop-up things that you see for screenwriting services about contests or software. And I noticed that there were a few script consultants who were putting ads up. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Or I'd get emails from, I don't know how. I guess I ended up on some kind of mailing list because I entered a contest. So I would get emails or what have you from various script consultants. And I thought, if I were just starting out and I wanted to ask a script consultant some questions, what would I ask them? And so that inspired this concept. I wanted to do a series of interviews with script consultants. And so at the time, I thought, okay, I can do 5. That's probably enough. But the more research I did, the more script consultants I found. So that initial 5 eventually became 50. So that's not even all of them either. And that I came up with these questions to ask a script consultant if I were to sit down with them for a face-to-face chat, what kind of stuff would I ask them? And so stuff like, what's the last thing you read or watched that you really liked, you thought was well written? How'd you get your start? What do you consider the components of a good script? What are some tropes or cliches you're just tired of seeing? With contests, yes or no, and that sort of thing. And so I put this series of interviews together and posted them over the course of just under a year. And a lot of people were really excited about it because I don't think anything had really been done like this before, that people knew about script consultants, but they never really talked to them like people. You never got to talk to them and just kind of pick their brains, so to speak. And when I finished the initial set of 50, I still had more people to talk to. So I thought, well, I'll just keep doing it until I run out of people. And that took a really long time because there were a lot of people. But I also started to talk to people who work in the film, filmmakers or professional screenwriters. I also started talking to writers in other mediums. I've talked to people who write comic books and web comics. I talked to a playwright. And everybody, even though we work in the same industry, everybody has a different viewpoint about the same topic. So one of the questions I always ask, especially for the consultants, is what are the components of a good script? And the answers a really wide variety. You would get, it's about story, it's about theme, it's about characters, it's about conflict. And all of these things were just vital information, I think, that would benefit any screenwriter, no matter what your experience level, that it's great to hear, because a lot of screenwriting books are, here's how you write a script. And when I put these together in a collection, these are more of a, here's how to make your script better. Because we figure you already know how to write a script, but we want to help take you to the next level, how to push your skills a little harder. And so far, the reception to the books has been quite satisfying. A lot of people, I don't think they really know what to expect when they go into it. So when they get the book and they read it, a lot of reactions I've gotten from people about this is really entertaining, that it's informative, and there's a lot of helpful information. And as we said, the title is Interviews About Screenwriting and Pie, because one of my side interests when I'm not writing is I love to cook and I love to bake. And so when I was putting the questions together, I wanted to ask a question that was on a personal note, to remind you that these are actually people. They have lives too. They're not just, it's not all about screenwriting and consulting 24/7. And so one of my dad's favorite expressions is life is short, so eat dessert first. So, and I really like to make pie. So I thought, well, why not just ask what's your favorite kind of pie? And a lot of people have said, this is my favorite question. This is the best question ever. I've never been asked that in an interview before. And it makes it that much more memorable because it shows that, yes, these are people who happen to be script consultants, not script consultants, and that's it. So just to be able to leave that impression, make it a little memorable for people, for both the interviewer and the people reading the interview, I think it's just really nice.
Now, as you've interviewed, like you said, at least 50 different consultants, writers, story analysts, what did you see as the most common thread that ran through most of their responses?
Well, see, that's the interesting part. There really isn't a common thread. It's more like there are several common threads,
Okay.
as I mentioned. So a lot of people talk about a lot of stories lack conflict, that these things just happen, or they feel the conflict is very forced. And they also want the characters to be a little more developed, because a lot of consultants will talk about how the characters feel flat or one-dimensional, that okay, this guy is angry. Well, why is he angry? Well, I know he just is. Well, no, that's not a reason. And a lot of people also talk about dialogue, that I mean, I've read a lot of scripts and the dialogue is very dry. It's very stilted, that it sounds like it's in a movie. It doesn't sound like it's an actual person talking. And all of these different factors, I think it's fascinating, because when you're putting together a screenplay, you have to take all of these things into consideration. And it can be overwhelming at times. And sometimes something might fall by the wayside, or you just don't really think about it as much until someone points it out to you. So for someone to say, well, I think you really need to have good conflict in a script, it doesn't mean people shouting at each other. It could be just something happening that goes against your protagonist. And some people, it might take them a little time to get the gist of that, to understand what exactly that's supposed to mean. And a lot of consultants were also talking about how a lot of newer writers, it's all about exposition. Like, well, as you know, John, my father founded this company back in '04, and that sort of thing, rather than making it feel organic, or making it feel that it's flowing naturally as part of the story, rather than just like, here's a big information dump for you to keep in mind for the rest of the story. So I think there really isn't one common thread. I think it's almost like, here are some basic guidelines to help point you in the right direction. And how you interpret those is up to you. But these are things that you should definitely keep in mind as you're working on your script.
Now, on the flip side of that coin, what was there any particular response or set of responses that really stood out from the rest?
Not really in terms of what are the components of a good script, but I think, because I'd seen this in reading so many scripts, that it's very predictable, or you can see what's coming a mile away, type of thing. And so when I asked the interviews, are there any tropes or cliches that you're just tired of seeing? It was almost split down the middle, that some people had a list of things, the cop who's like 2 days away from retirement, or the woman whose life won't be fulfilled until she finds a man, that sort of thing. But other people are like, of the opinion that actually there really aren't any cliches. It's what you do with the material. Now, you can do it in a way we've already seen it done a million times before, but try to find that new spin, that new little twist on it that we haven't seen. What's something that we could do that totally goes against our expectations? And I think that was the most fascinating one of all, just because when I ask the questions, I don't know what to expect for the answers, but to see that, especially when it's almost half of the people saying, I don't really think there are these things, I just think you need to find a new and original approach to it, as opposed to people who have their already established list of what they are tired of seeing. I just think that's fascinating. I think that also really helps a writer, because when you read a script from a newer writer, you're going to most likely see a lot of things you've seen in other films and other stories. And it can be a little frustrating, because when I read a script, I want to be entertained. And I don't want to think, well, okay, well, this guy who came in at page 12, he's going to end up being, he's going to be the love interest, even though she's already engaged to this other guy. And it's okay, but I think when you're starting out, you kind of have to, I guess, work out the kinks in your writing so that you can take a new approach. What's a way we can do this story that we haven't seen before? And I think that would help eliminate the almost relying on cliches or tropes and that sort of thing.
Now, like I said, I really enjoyed looking through the book, and now that I've got you here, I think I'd like to turn the tables on you
Okay,
and throw some of your own questions back at you.
sure.
For instance, what do you believe are the components of a good script?
I think the components of a good script, like I just said, an original story, something unique, something we haven't seen before. Or if you're going to do a story we have seen before, what's a completely new approach to it? Um, I've talked about this before. Even though the characters in the public domain, that it seems like there are so many variations on the Peter Pan story. And, that's great if you want to write that, but I guess it just, I don't want to say it bothers me, but I just don't understand why someone would say, well, I could come up with something totally new and original, or I'll just go back to these other characters and situations that everybody's familiar with. Because when you write a script, you want it to be familiar but different. So, okay, here's a character that's been around for over 100 years, and they've done a lot of interpretations of it. So what could you do that would make it totally different? Or it doesn't even have to follow the same guidelines of that character's history. You could just take one aspect of it and say that, hey, that's a great idea for something, and I don't think I've ever seen that before, and just run with it. So I think, let's see, components of a good script. So original story, definitely characters that seem like people, not caricatures, not things we've seen before. So what's something, again, unique and original is really what it comes down to. Let's see, dialogue. One of the things I always suggest to writers is, after you have written a scene or a sequence, read it out loud. Does it sound like two people, or does it sound like your characters are real people? Does it sound like someone talking, or does it sound very fake and movie-like? Because if it's the latter, then you want to go back and tweak it a little bit so that it sounds more authentic. That's the word I'm going for. Let's see. So story, characters, dialogue. To me, those are the three big ones, because I think conflict is also very important, because I've read a lot of scripts where it's just the characters talking back and forth. There's no conflict. It's just, hey, Sam, how are you? Well, I'm good, Mike. Well, what's new? Oh, the sync's been acting up. Well, imagine, are you going to want to sit in the theater and watch these characters just back and forth, back and forth? So that's something else to keep in mind. And I think the one, I guess well, there's a lot of guidelines, but the one I always really try to emphasize with writers is show, don't tell. Because especially I've just finished reading it for a contest, and a lot of the scripts I think were newer writers who had written books before. So a lot of the descriptions were what you'd expect in a book or a novel rather than a screenplay, because one gave the entire character's backstory in all the action lines. Like Jim was a CIA agent, but then he retired and moved to Delaware. But his daughter, had a falling out with his. No, you're not. That's not how this works. You're supposed to, remember, it's a visual medium with sound. So have the character, if you have to have a little expository dialogue, do that, but also have the characters doing something, like maybe he's arguing with his daughter. I love to give this example. So, interior kitchen night, Bob stands at the sink washing dishes, but his mind drifts to that girl he took to the prom, and then she dumped him, and then she ran off to live in Ohio with a plumber. Now she's got 4 kids. What are we going to see on the screen? We're going to see a guy washing dishes. So how are we going to know what he's thinking? I call that, how do we know that type writing? And that's something I always stress to writers, that try to avoid that, because you can't show us what the character is thinking or why they're doing something or what something really means. You have to explain it in a visual or in an auditory manner. And I think that's something that a lot of writers really need to keep in mind.
Now, you mentioned a lot of the common mistakes you see, and a lot of the common things that you see as components of what makes a script work or not. And you also mentioned some of the tropes, like taking public domain characters and applying them to new stories. What are some other common tropes that you run across?
Oh, wow. I guess it's hard to really put a finger on exactly what, because there's just so many. I've read a lot of scripts where you've got the schlubby preteen outcast who finds their inner strength. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that story, but I guess it's all about how it's presented in the story. Um, I have not, fortunately, I haven't seen as many of the "my life's not going to be complete until I get married" type of story. I also haven't seen as many lately. The hitman who wants to retire, or who gets pulled back in for one more job, or the heist that goes wrong. I think it's really about when you're putting your story together, try to visualize how is this different from what has come before, because you've got almost over 100 years of film before your story is ready, and there have been a lot of interpretations of those stories. So you want to be able to give us something new and unique and original, but also, again, familiar but different. There's nothing wrong with that. It's great. A lot of people love that sort of thing. Or maybe you have to be careful. Sometimes people go a little too far off to left field, and you're not really sure what's going on. So you have to, it's a fine line between totally unique and totally, I don't get it.
Now, I'm assuming that you've worked with clients who've entered in a screenplay contest. I know you said you've judged screenplay contests. I've also judged them. I've also won one. I've also had
Oh,
clients who
congratulations.
thank you. I've also had clients who placed in screenplay contests. So what are your opinions on screenplay contests? Do you think they're worth it, or
I
does it
think
depend
it
on the
depends
script?
on, it really depends on what you want to get out of the contest. Because as you're well aware, there are pretty much a zillion contests out there. If you enter a contest with the intention, like, this is going to establish my career, that's not true, because there are writers who've done well in the nickel, like finalists. It doesn't automatically mean they're going to get a contract and have a film made. I know a couple of writers who've been finalists for the nickel, and it took one person 8 years for her to get any traction on the script that won. And also, if you look at a lot of the writers, how many of them are still working? Yes, it's fantastic to win a high profile contest. I mean, the three that I think are really important are the nickel, Page, and Austin. And there are a lot of other ones that are probably like just a level below that. But you also have to keep in mind, like for Austin last year, they got like 14,000 entries. That's film and TV. And the nickel gets like 8,500, and Austin gets about that as well. And so does Page. So you have to really make sure your script is as rock solid as it's going to be on every level, because you're going up really against every other screenwriter in the world who sends their contest in as well. But if you're just into a contest because you think it would be nice to, win a nice little prize, if you're in it for the money, well, that's not really worth it, because a lot of them don't offer great prizes. If you're into it because you want to maybe get some free screenwriting software, you might have a good chance at that. If you just want a nice little set of laurels that you can print up and put on your office wall, there's a ton of them that'll do that. It really comes down to, what do you want to get out of the contest? Are you looking to, I mean, I don't do it myself, but I know a lot of writers who will enter a contest and they will pay to get the notes as well. I don't. But that's also a bit of a crapshoot, because sometimes the notes aren't that good. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of contest notes where the comments were almost generic. Like, oh, the writing was good. I liked the characters. This was fun. It's like, well, that doesn't help me make the script better. That's just your thoughts on it. Once I got a note that was like, I thought this script was good, but I think it would have been better if it had been about this. Well, that's not helping me at all. I don't want to write the script that you want. I'm writing the script that I want, and your note doesn't help me whatsoever. So you have to really, I guess, do your due diligence on a contest. What are the prizes that are offered? Is this something that appeals to you? Are you looking for industry access? Are you looking for money? Are you looking for software? Are you just looking to see how it fares against other scripts? I mean, there are so many different reasons to enter a contest, but also a lot of writers will do well in a very small contest. Like if a manager or a producer got an email that said, winner Des Moines screenwriting contest, they're not going to care. because yeah, that's great that you won or you did well in it, but so what? It's nothing against the Des Moines screenwriting contest, if there is such a thing, but how many scripts were you competing against with that one? Maybe like 500. Compare that to the 8,600 that gets sent to the nickel, and they have to pick the top 5. So you have to really gauge what is it you want to get out of this contest that you want to enter. And also a lot of contests, if you keep entering them, those fees do add up. That it can range anywhere from like what, $40 to maybe $100 just to enter. And that's not even counting the notes. So you have to really take into consideration, what do you want to get out of this contest? And also, what are you willing to do to enter that contest?
And another aspect that in terms of screenplay contests involves genre contests.
Mm.
Well, what do you think of, like, say, people who write in a specific genre entering genre contests?
I think those are really good. I mean, I have a Western script that's done well in Western themed contests, and it's also a bit of an action story, so it's done well in some action contests. How does it fare in the Nickel or Austin? Not as much, because they tend, in my opinion, they tend to favor more dramatic work or something that's totally different from anything they've seen before. And my script, doesn't really fall into that category, and that's okay. But if you're looking to do well in your genre, you have an action film, hey, enter the action contest. There are a ton of horror contests that they get a slew of entries. And those are great to enter, because if that's what you love to write, then yeah, by all means, go ahead and enter those contests, because you never know who's looking at the winners. You could also use that to promote your script. Maybe if you could connect with a producer, because if you have a horror movie and it does well in an established and respected horror contest, you could maybe send a query to Blumhouse or another production company that specializes in horror. They might be interested. You never know. No guarantee, but you have a better shot at that than saying, hey, I've got this rom-com. You're not going to contact this production company that does horror movies.
And for writers who might be looking for mentors such as yourself to guide them through writing process, whether it's contests, whether it's improving their script, whether it's finding managers, what advice would you give them on what to look for in a mentor or consultant to work with?
Well, those are two different things, because a consultant, that's their job. A mentor, a lot of times they're doing it because they're a nice person and they want to help you. And they're not charging you for that. If you go to a consultant, they're going to tell you how to make your script better. But if you go with a mentor, they're going to also tell you how to make a script better, but I think in a more personal kind of way, that they're interested in working with you. And how do you connect with a mentor type? Well, I think social media is probably the best way. Don't be all creepy, like, hey, we just connected, I really want you to help me, because they're going to scare them away. This is a business of relationships, so you need to establish that relationship, but be professional about it. A friend of mine put it very succinctly. How would you feel if you were at a cocktail party, someone came up to you, shoved their business card in your face and said, you don't know me, but I've heard of you and I want you to help me? Do you think you'd want to help them? No, you probably tell them to, hey, get lost. You're being pushy and annoying, and I don't like that. That you have to be respectful. Again, we're people too. And if you want my help, establish that relationship. Don't just come at me and say, this is what I want from you. Get to know me. I'm a person too. And so if I get to, if I have a relationship that's established with somebody, I'm more open to the idea of helping them, rather than some total stranger saying, hey, I think you're a good writer. Can you help me? I'd be less inclined to help that person than someone said, hey, I've seen you on Twitter, or I've read your blog. I really like this. If you have time, would you be willing, can we talk? That sort of thing. So it's about taking the time to establish that relationship.
And how can people follow what you're working on?
Well, as we started with the very back at the beginning, so I run the screenwriting blog Maximum Z. It's at maximumz.blog. And I'm also on Twitter at maximum_Z. And like I said, I post once a week. Sometimes it's about my stuff. Sometimes it's an interview. Sometimes it's, I've done just a couple of weeks ago, did a script showcase where I had writers send in their spec scripts for TV and film, and a lot of people, there's some great stuff in there, I got to say. I am always happy to talk to people, but I'm kind of cutting back on reading, because it can get out of hand very quickly. And then also I want to work on my own stuff. So I try to dedicate a certain amount of time each week to how much I can do of my own and how much I can do for other people. But I'm always happy to, if you have a question or maybe I can point you in the right direction, feel free to get in touch.
Okay. I just want to say that I think you've given some great advice. I think people are going to get a lot of use out of it, and they're definitely going to get a lot of use out of this. The Go Ahead and Ask Volume 1, and Volume 2 will be out by the time this goes up.
Here's Volume 1.
Yep. All right.
And here's Volume 2.
Yes. All right. And I just want to say it's been a real honor and pleasure to get to talk to you today. And I hope everyone goes out and gets both volumes, and hopefully Volume 3 will be coming soon.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I mean, and as we said at the beginning, it's great to finally get to see you in person.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.